Good morning, Mercy. Hope you're well. Hope you got outside yesterday. It was gorgeous, and frankly, I needed that. I needed like a kick in the pants to remember that summer's coming, baby. And however we get to do it, it's still gonna be summer. And it got me thinking about summer camp. And yeah, I cried a few good tears because now both Mercy's summer camp and the summer camp that I used to work at have officially canceled their summer events. And so it brought up all these like longings in me that I've had to say goodbye to. And disappointment sucks. I don't know if there's another way to say that. But that brings me to this idea of the magic of summer camp prompted me to think about some COVID-19 type season invitations. So what I want to do today for devotions is, one, I'm going to give you kind of a mini slice of what this Mercy Wednesday class that's coming in May. If you at the end of this you're like, yeah, I would like to learn some more about that. We pray that you join us. That'd be awesome. And I want to just give you a peek today at like the kind of stuff we're talking about, so that you have an idea if it's something that would be helpful to you right now or not. Um, yeah. So this phrase liminal space showed up for me when we started talking about the Good Friday service. And it's an idea. It's from this Latin word limen. I don't know how to pronounce Latin, but this idea of a threshold. Okay, of a threshold moment, where there's a moment where you are standing in a doorway of sorts. And when you're going to walk through the doorway, there is a sadness, a bereavement of everything that's behind you. Are we not experiencing that, right? There's a saying goodbye to certain things, certain ways of being, identities, skills, capabilities, freedom. There's a saying goodbye, and in the threshold moment, you don't always get to know what's in the next room, right? Sometimes the only way you get to know what's in the next room, what you're walking into the next space with, is by going into it. And that is terrifying. Right? The ambiguity around it is terrifying. Wondering if you have what it takes to be present in the next space is terrifying. Wondering what baggage you're carrying with you through the threshold moment, and all this stuff. And so there's just something that has been so powerful in just frankly what Jesus has been talking to me through the word and through some spiritual practices in this season, about basically like doing threshold moments well, without fear, doing it with a sense of clarity and purpose. So the goal of this class, when I'll kind of show you a little today, a little piece of it, is to basically take three parts of my life. This idea that I have invested just every summer, literally, of my life in some kind of camping ministry. I think there's magic at summer camp, and I think part of it comes because it is a liminal space. It's a threshold. It's a transition. Okay, so we'll talk about summer camp, and then we're going to talk about Jesus, 4 stories in the gospel about how Jesus does threshold moments. And it turns out he does them a lot. He likes them, and he drags his disciples through with him through these moments. And so what is there from what Jesus experiences on earth in a body? What's there for us? And then 3, I really believe that the spiritual practices is kind of like put your money where your mouth is in terms of like faith, growth, and transition and transformation. Every week there'll be some kind of practice for you to walk into, to try on. And the hope is, right, like that I can't give you answers about your threshold moment. That's got to come in a dialogue with you and the Holy Spirit. And I have such faith that Jesus wants to walk with us through this moment of COVID-19, where we have said, willingly or unwillingly, said goodbye to so many things. And in this moment, I believe there's a clarifying identity piece that God wants to do in us, so that we can walk into the next moment in a better way. So that's the format, that's the structure. Let's do a little mini one right now. All right. So liminal space, so we're all on the same page. I don't want the word to be scary to you. It's a good idea, right? A liminal space is just where Jesus leads us into a place of unmaking and unlearning. It's uncomfortable because we're called to be vulnerable. Right? And while it's a place of uncertainty, it's precisely here that a person can clarify their own sense of identity and purpose. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you like what this looks like at summer camp. I know some of you are camp people, some of you are not. This could be any kind of transition or temporary moment in your life. It doesn't have to be camp, but for me, I see the magic of this happen in the fact that the time of the season at summer camp is temporary, right? Camp literally lets you kind of pick up an alternate view of reality for however long you go, right? If I used to work for the whole summer at a summer camp, and you just you went to the woods and things were different. Everybody at camp is in transition. That's another part of the magic, right? You are not the only one transitioning. That's another piece of the COVID-19 magic. Everybody is transitioning right now, and so there's something about that together in this messy middle space that we got to pay attention to. The other magic at camp, because it's temporary and transitional, is you get to see this. You get to see kids kind of leave their social baggage, identities that they maybe don't want or have picked up and that they didn't bargain for. They get to leave those behind for a while. They get to kind of pick up a persona and try it on. And I believe in the season of COVID-19, when life gets really messy, our identities get a little shaky. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? That's a sense, there's a sense of freedom and opportunity in that, and saying, what about who I was am I okay walking through a doorway and leaving behind me? And what about who I was really matters to me? And so some of these practices are going to help us get in touch with that. And then the other thing that's awesome about camp is that there is positive communal intention, right? If you have a good leader, it's drilled into you. It's just drilled into you that we are here for a purpose, whether it's Boy Scouts or whether it's Jesus or whatever the rallying goal is. There is one, right? There is a rallying goal, and this is where I believe that COVID-19 is offering an invitation to the church, that there is a message for the church in this moment to become a new kind of church, and so we'll talk about that. Okay, so a little bit of summer camp. Little bit of let's look at one time Jesus did this. Okay, so in one of these moments, one of these beginning moments for Jesus, kind of the kickstarter to his transitional life, was his baptism. So I'm gonna read Mark 1:9-11, and then we'll just point out a few things that Jesus did in his transition moment. Okay, so this is Mark 1:9-11. It says, in those days, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee, and he was baptized in the Jordan by John. And as soon as he came up out of the water, he saw the heavens being torn open, and the Spirit descending to him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, and it said, "You're my beloved Son, and I take delight in you." So this is pretty much the big first transition for Jesus in his ministry. When he leaves his town, right, when he leaves Nazareth, he's not going down the block. He's traveling miles and miles to go to the Jordan River to be baptized. And I can only imagine as he's on this journey, he is saying goodbye to some things, right? To his family ties, to his job description. It seems like the days of construction are over, and that there's a new version of construction happening in his future, a kingdom work, right? A new building, a new type of building. His religious practices, right? He grew up in the Jewish faith, so his religious practices would have been tied to his time in the synagogue and his time in his home with his family. And he's about to practice his religion. He's about to do this in a wayfarer way, in a out in the desert, out in the river, out by the out in the world, in a transitory way from here on out. And so I think it's so good, right, that he goes and he treks himself over to the Jordan River. Okay, the Jordan River, the place where God's people in the Old Testament came into the Promised Land. Right, they crossed this river. You can read in Joshua 3, they cross this river. Ark of the Covenant goes in, right? The water is held up. And God's people cross this river. And they pick up these 12 stones out of the river. And they say, let's remember what God did here. And all of this history, Jesus knew. And I think that there's something really beautiful, and this is our idea for today, in this idea that our lives are circular, they're cyclical, that there's something Jesus is starting anew, is starting fresh in this baptism. He goes back to this place where God's people went from being nobodies to being somebodies, right? To being refugees and slaves, to being residents, to being God's chosen people in a new way, in a new land. And so Jesus is in a sense walking around to that, right? He comes back, and again, like summer camp, you do this, right? You come back every year, and you're a new person when you come back, and you come back, and you come back. And so I think that in this moment when Jesus, the skies, and it says rips open, right? I did this. God bless kids curriculum writers, but it's always like this really idyllic, sunshiny day, and the water is very peaceful. No, not really. And like it says, the sky is ripped open. And the Jordan River at this time, there's no like dams working. It's a moving river. Okay, it's a big, probably somewhat scary body of water in certain seasons, and there's something about Jesus in this moment going into the water, saying goodbye. Right? Saying goodbye to a past and yes to a future that just has to be in his mind related to this identity of God's people throughout history. Right? That he knows he's in a time and a place, and he's not the first one to be there, and that something God is doing in this moment is both confirming his identity, you are my son, my beloved, and you I am well pleased, and there's an invitation into a future. I want to talk about this dove, right? This dove comes down. And doves, guys, right? This is the bird of sacrifice. This is the bird that it's a bloodshed bird. It's not the Sunday school like, this is the bird of pain and suffering. The bird that reminds us that Jesus' work comes at a cost. And so this idea of circling back, of Jesus walking in the footsteps again of God's people in the Jordan River and stepping from his past into something new, I think is so powerful for us. And so the one practice that I want to offer to you today, something you can go and try, is basically to consider the ways that walking in cycles throughout your life, what does it say to you? What is it speaking to you? What does it do? There's this Celtic practice. It's called walking the rounds. Okay, and when they do this, they find a place to walk. You find a path. You can do anything. You can do around a tree. You can do in a loop around the lake. Okay, you could do any of this, and you walk in a clockwise in a clockwise manner, and typically they would do it in rounds, 1, 3, 5, 7, or 12 rounds. And the idea of walking around something again, it's just like, right, Jesus walked back to this Jordan River. He crossed this Jordan River just as God's people had done before. And the idea is that as you're walking, you remind yourself that we are more than linear beings. We are more than linear thinkers. That so much of what God does in our lives is part of a bigger story that has been spiraling since creation, that will continue spiraling, right? God will continually keep working in us in ways that show up, and they're often seasonal, right? They're often connected to things in our past. So there's kind of this idea as you're taking your walk, if you can pay attention to the fact that while you're walking, you will not be getting anywhere. Really, right? Like if you're walking a loop, you get back where you started. And that is such a powerful practice to just receive, basically, period. To receive, period. That God has got something to say to you, even if you're not making progress. Okay, some of us I know feel like this season has got us stuck. It's got us put like in a place where we can't make progress, or we can't check our list, or we're not spiritually growing the way we want to go. Something about this circling, do the tree in your yard, right? If you have 5 minutes, what are you doing? How are you letting God speak to you right here and right now? Because you know what? I bet like on your third trip around the tree, you might be a little easier. Might be a little easier to be open and soft with Jesus. And so the idea is, can you release your expectations for like what's on the other side of the threshold, And in walking the rounds, can you just offer up to God this present moment? God, what do you have to say to me right here and right now? Okay, and it might be, hey, you are mine, right? You are my beloved, and in you I'm well pleased. But frankly, that's between you and Jesus. So I just want to ask you, like, if this sounds like a longing in your heart that you would like to know what God has for you in the right here and the right now, find yourself something to walk around. Ask the Lord to come and meet you in it, and just see what might be here in the present moment for you. Okay, so this class is gonna be longer, and there'll be like half kind of Bible-y stuff and spiritual practices, and then half you'll get to talk and actually do some of these practices. We'll make space for that together. If you want to do that, let me know. It'd be awesome. If you got questions and you're like, I would like some more details, Cassie, shoot me an email. Happy to do that. I pray it's a great day. You know, like let's get what God has for us today in this COVID-19, whatever, but like that you would find some time today to like let God speak to your present moment. Okay, love you guys. Have a good one.